Hi there. Today we're going to talk about creating additional base views. My assumption is that you're a developer or administrator level user because end users cannot create base views, but they can take advantage of them. So what is a base view in Aptify? It's essentially a set of instructions in SQL that allow you to join multiple services under information so they can be used in views, searching, reports, etc. So let me give you an example. I'm going to use a prompted view to find a person's record. When I open the person's record, you can see that the information that's stored about this individual, it's in the person service as well as other services related to it. So let's say that I go to my details tab and I go to the save payment methods that we have for Aisha Baldwin. You can see that I have one credit card that's been stored. So if I'm looking for this information for an individual, all I have to do is open the record, go to this view, and I'll get what I want. However, if I want to see the information for multiple individuals, what I would have to do is create a view that shows me that information. However, with no base view to join these two services, that's pretty much impossible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the base view for you so you can see how we can extract the save payment methods for multiple individuals. So let's go ahead and do that. But before we start, what I like to say about creating base views in Aptify is have a plan so you know what services you need to join and what fields you want to use from those services, as well as make sure that you search on your implementation of Aptify so you know that you don't have that base view created already. So in this case, we know that we don't have that base view, and we're going to go ahead and create it. And I have somewhat of a plan of what fields I'm going to include. If I'm in the view of entities, I'm going to go ahead and use my new base view wizard, and I'm going to change my entity to the parent entity, in this case, the person's entity. That's going to drive my base view. Now, what I'm going to name this is the name of my main entity, and then the entity that I'm interested in joining. Okay, so I have persons with save payment methods. I'm going to go ahead and copy this. My base view should be VW because that's what we normally do with base views in Aptify. And then my display name could have spaces between these words so the person using this can identify the name easily. It's always a good idea to describe them. That gives them a notion of what our intent was. So what I'm going to do here is I'm basically going to put the name of my view and then just information after that. All right, so I'm going to move to the next step. And then the next step of my wizard, Aptify, chooses the entity that is driving my base view, and any fields in there can pretty much go in my new persons with save pay methods base view. Now, for the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to grab a couple of the fields in the person's entity. You can see that I have all the fields at my disposal. So I have 182. I could move all of them if I wanted to. But in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select name with company, and I'm going to go ahead and add that to my base view. And I'm also going to select the title of this individual. Now, you can see that if I do shift and I select more than one, I could also move groups of them to my base view. And the other thing I want to point out is that if I double click on these, you can see that I can make changes for this particular base view based on what was already determined in the entity. So in this case, I want my name with company field in the person's entity to be default in view. All right, so I have my two fields for persons. Now I'm going to go to the drop down for entity, and I'm going to choose my person save payment method entity. And this particular one has 26 items and the fields that I can move to my new base view. Now, I generally want to stay away from IDs and any ID that is joining this to yet another service. So what I'm going to do, again, for the sake of simplicity, is just choose a handful of these. I'm going to go ahead and choose name, payment type, and then I'm going to choose a couple of dates, the start date, the end date, and then whether this payment method is active or not. Now, if I leave it this way, which I don't think is best practice, you can see that there's a possibility that some of these fields are named the same as in other services. So what I want to do is want to make sure that I clearly identify what these particular fields are. And you can see the entity here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open these fields, and I'm going to put an acronym here that clearly determines where they came from. So in this case, I'm going to do P for persons, and then save payment methods as an acronym in all of these. That would give me a pretty good idea where they came from. In the case of the display name, I'm just going to put a space. So I'm going to do that with all of these. And I want to make sure that I'm disciplined when I do this, because otherwise our users using this base view are not going to be clear on where these things are coming from in terms of the fields. So just a couple more here. I'm doing the same thing that I had mentioned for the first one. And I'll do the same thing for the is active field. All right. So now I have pretty much all the fields that I need, or that I want in this case. I'm going to go ahead and click next. And Aptify is just going to take a minute here to make sure that it's processing the information that it's required to build the SQL and the base view record in the entity. Now keep in mind that this particular base view, because I started from the person's entity, is going to end up in the person's entity record. And I'll take a look at it later on so you can see where Aptify is saving this particular base view. Once it has completed the process, all I have to do is finish it and then choose not to do another one, and I have myself a base view. Now, how do I use this base view? Well, because I created this in the person's entity, that's where I want to be. I'm going to go ahead and navigate to my person service. I'm going to create a brand new view here. That's one thing I can do with a base view. And I'm going to call this one all persons with saved payment methods. Now, I can choose any type of view I want. I'm going to choose the default list view. And then I want to make sure I change my base view from the regular person's base view to the one that I just created, persons with saved payment methods. If I go to my fields, you can see that the fields that we chose when we created the base view are defaulted as showing up in my view automatically. And then I want to make sure I throw a filter, because otherwise, if there's no payment method saved for a person, all persons are going to show up. So what I want to make sure is I choose my field for the name of the method, and then I want to make sure that this one is not blank. If I say OK, Aptify is basically going to choose every person with a method of payment that has been saved in that person's record, and is going to give me a view of that with the fields that I have selected. Now, one more thing. Before we finish, we want to see where this was stored in Aptify. So if I go to my entities and I search for my person's entity, which is the one that was driving this base view, you can see that there's going to be a tab for base views. And if I navigate to the bottom of this, you can see that my persons with saved payment methods, it's a record in my entity. Thank you very much.